Welcome to our talk. My name is Patrick Swartz. I'm the lead technical analyst for the Linux team at Tyson Foods. And this is Rob Booth from SaltStack, who will help me present today and keep me on track. So today we're going to talk about, well, first of all, who are we? Who is Tyson Foods? Who is SaltStack? Although the second question is probably well answered by now. A little bit about our companies, what our Tyson environment looks like, why did we go the direction we went, what were some of our requirements that we needed to solve or that we're trying to solve within the Tyson food ecosystem. Some of the bumps, the challenges that we encountered in our path as we grew, as we went on, and then we'll try to talk a little bit on how we overcame some of those bumps. Or just plowed straight through them in some cases. We'll try to show you a little bit of what we've ended up, at least for now, and then a little bit about how we see the value of the combination of SaltStack and SUSE Manager and the partnership that we have between the two companies and Tyson Foods. And at any point you have questions along the way, if they're not too hard, I'll answer them. Okay? So Tyson Foods, who is Tyson Foods? We're one of the largest protein producers in the U.S. You may not be able to read all of these, but we have, in 2014 we had over $40 billion worth of sales, and I think 2015 was pushing 50 plus. There's 113,000 team members within Tyson Foods. We have 11,000 independent farmers. One of the unique things about Tyson is we don't own every farm. We contract with farmers. We help provide them with, in the chicken business, for example, we help provide them with the chicks, and they raise them and sell them back to us. So in that process, for example, in fiscal year 15, we produced 35 million head of chicken a week. Let that number sink in for a moment. So, every time when you go to McDonald's and get some chicken McNuggets, think of Tyson Foods. So, just a little bit about, we do not only chicken, but we also do beef, we do pork, some prepared foods, and along with that, some of our brands, and then here's a larger list of some of the brands. Some of the brands you may be familiar with and not even recognize that they're from Tyson. 2.5 years ago, we bought Hillshire Farms Foods, which brought in a large portfolio of name brands, like Jimmy Dean Sausage, for example, is now under the banner of Tyson Foods. So that's a little bit about who we are as we plow through what we're trying to do. And then salt.
So, SaltStack. There's a lot of salt going on at this conference. And I won't go into a lot of deep things about salt. We are an open source software company headquartered out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm based out of Texas. But really what SaltStack is a systems management orchestration system. It's that system to, outside of configuration management, just reacting to your environment. It's built into SUSE Manager, which we're going to get more into that. But we like to be the glue in between the individual systems that you have in your environment, orchestrate those tasks.
Very good. So a little bit about our environment. We have multiple data centers. Our main data centers, we have 2 that are in Springdale, Arkansas. They're only separated by a couple of thousand yards between the 2, if that. And then we have another data center up in Dakota City, Nebraska, which we basically use as our DR site. We have, like a lot of you, we have multiple server OS environments between SUSE and Red Hat. We have AIX as a predominant player within our environment, and of course, everybody has Windows, right? So that's, we have to work within that framework. We do have some legacy, that we inherited from Hillshire Farms with HPUX still, but they're quickly going away. We are a VMware infrastructure shop, and we have, in that, we have multiple environments. Our VMware is broke down into, we have a VMware structure specifically for our Linux team. We have a VMware structure specifically for our Windows team. We have another VMware structure specifically for our VDI team. So we're very isolated in those environments for a lot of different reasons. A lot of it's management, some of it's political, but that's how we are structured today. And of course, we work across multiple teams. And our Linux team is kind of that seed. We are the guinea pigs, if you will, of all of Tyson. If it happens on Linux and it works, then we can maybe spread it out to the other environments. If it happens on Linux and it blows up, well, then we know not to go there. So we are the Linux team. So we have the Linux admin team. There's another, the AIX team. They're the old stodgy good guys, that hold up the massive databases and pretend that they're the ones that everybody has to look to. And of course we have the Windows teams. Then we get into the application because we're a large SAP shop. And if SAP sells it, we buy it pretty much. So if anybody in here from SAP, you're welcome. Anyway. Yeah. So we have the SAP application team. We have the SAP database teams. Then we have, there are some things that run that aren't on SAP. And then of course we have those teams that we need to support that may have applications running on our Linux environment as well. But for the most part, we follow the SAP development flow. They use, I think that's the term that they use is Rails, not to be confused with Ruby on Rails, but it's a development flow that they use. And then we as the Linux team have to adhere to their development cycle, which causes some hiccups along the way, frustrations, but it's the way it is. So that's kind of a snapshot from that 40,000-foot view of the Linux or the Tyson environment. Any questions so far? So as we go into, from a Linux perspective, what were we trying to do? Well, first and foremost, because we have very strict guidelines as far as SAP development goes, that we have our test, dev, QA, pre-prod, and prod. We have to be very, very careful that as development happens in test, it can't bleed into and affect production. That would not bode well, and I would have to fill out my resume. At the same time, we have to have team collaboration, not just within the Linux team, but we have to be able to collaborate with the SAP application team, the SAP database team, the other teams that are within the Tyson ecosystem. We have to be able to find a way to collaborate for those patch deployments, for example, or system builds even. And how do we do that? So that was another one of our key requirements within what we were looking to do. And it follows right along with our code configuration and our standardization methodology that we're trying to push for years up until just prior to the Hillshire migration or acquisition. We had, the AIX team was they had been doing it for a number of years. They had a very specific way they were doing it. They had all their scripts that they knew how to use and do, and they maintained them themselves as a team of 2 or 3, But as we started to grow, and as Linux started to grow, and as Tyson put their toes into the water of Linux and realized that water wasn't water, it's quicksand, because they immediately, went all the way in. And, started hiring folks like my co-partner here, Jake, at the front, and I to come on and help guide our Linux environment. So we had to find a way to start standardizing on all the code configuration that goes on within the systems, and make sure that as the systems are deployed, they meet certain criteria. And as everybody knows who builds systems, sometimes you build them by hand. You might build server one way and server 2 another way. You might have missed a step along the way, especially if you're following a 12 or 13 page build document. It's easy to miss the steps along the way. So we had to find a way to help standardize that and make sure that the systems that we deployed were exact and met all the specifications. At the same time, we need to find a way to help with some of that command line complexity. As with all of those scripts that we have, we needed a way to simplify that. So as we brought on new talent within Tyson, which we're continuously doing, not so that their learning curve wasn't quite so steep to come on board. So that was another requirement that we looked at. Our patch deployment, audit remediation, both for Linux and AIX, and we're still struggling with that, to be quite honest. As we try to get plugged into the SAP development cycle, so we can find those downtimes. Because once they lock the kernel, the SAP kernel, to a particular package stack, we can't touch the system after that because they've already checked off all their boxes. And if we miss that stack, then we have to wait all the way through to come back around again to back to test. So we've got to get plugged in early. And then, of course, I had a dream of creating this automated level 1 support system or structure. The idea of, when I first hired on at Tyson, I was getting these calls at 2 in the morning because VAR was at 75%. That's silly. When we could run the same commands over and over again. So instead, with the inclusion of SALT now, creating reactors so that we could have some of those somewhat mundane tasks that could be repeated, and we knew what we wanted to do. We knew we were going to do those things every time anyway. Why not set up a reactor so that system could maybe grow some and save that 2 in the morning phone call from the alert team? So that's kind of another possible requirement that we looked at as we moved into this deployment. All right, our bumps. So let me back up a little bit here. When we first brought in SUSE Manager, it was SUSE Manager 2, we had gone through a pretty exhaustive examination. We were both a Red Hat and a SUSE shop. And we had to first decide, are we going to standardize on a Linux distribution? And of course, we all, being a key SAP development, everything we write on, it rides on SAP. It just made sense to make it SUSE. But we also, at the same time, we still had to support our RHEL systems. And SUSE Manager provided that, even at 2.1 stage, provided that ability for us to manage both our Red Hat and our SUSE infrastructure from a single console. And so that was a major bonus. And when we were going through the training for SUSE Manager 2.1, and we were talking about this automation, code configuration, we were looking, and then we started looking at things like Puppet and CF Engine and Chef and some of the others. And then I found out that, oh my goodness, SALT was going to be included in SUSE Manager 3.0. And it's like, yes, So we started diving down into what SALT could do for us. And so we quickly volunteered our services to SUSE and to SALT, that we could be that early adopter and willing guinea pig to start working with the SUSE 3.0 upgrade. And so in that, we come across a few bumps along the way. Some of those bumps that we found, being that we were a VMware shop, initially, the first thing we did, we built a SUSE image, our Red Hat image, and then we converted it to a template. Well, what I didn't realize early on is this thing called the machine ID. That is very, if you don't know about it, it's kind of hidden. We had cloned many machines with this machine ID. And it wasn't an issue with SUSE Manager 2.1. It wasn't used. But after I had done the migration to SUSE Manager 3, and the migration process that SUSE has provided works. It works well if your environment's clean. If it's not so clean, you run into some problems. And we found that machine ID caused us a great deal of issues. And it was our fault, not the process of migrating from SUSE 2.1 to SUSE Manager 2.1 to SUSE Manager 3. Had we not had that issue, we could have kept our original SUSE 2.1 server running, but in the process of, instead, our migration failed. And it failed in a wonderful fashion. You could, if you're familiar with the SUSE Manager interface, you've got your system and you've got your tabs for information about that particular system. As you click between the different tabs for a particular system, the name of that system would change. Yeah, I'm like, wasn't I just on server A? And why does it say server B now at the top? And you click another tab, and now it says server C. And you click back to the original tab, and now it says server D. You know, and it did that because the underlying infrastructure was relying on that machine ID, and all those machines was using that same non-unique machine ID. And so that caused us a great deal of problems initially. And the early stages of the SUSE Manager 3.0 GUI didn't show you that machine ID value. So there was nothing in the GUI itself to identify us, for us to look at, or at least I didn't find in the early GUI. So that was one of the major bumps we came across. And as we started looking down through, as we started working through some of those, rebuilt our SUSE server, our SUSE server, again, started from scratch, started bringing all of our minions on board from a brand new infrastructure. Thankfully, we weren't so large that it was an impossible task. We were still brand new, still 300 or 400 systems that we had to go through and touch. 300 or 400 systems. Either way, we found ways to script that and make that easily doable enough, because we didn't have enough salt deployed yet to make that possible. We also then, as we started working through code configuration, we bought and we looked at a couple of different Git backend systems. We finalized shameless plug for GitLabs after looking at several others, and finalized on that one is our Git server backend. And so we needed a way to maintain our code in Git, but try to incorporate that with SUSE Manager and our Salt backend now, our brand new SUSE Manager install, try to tie that into our Git infrastructure. So that was a little bit of a bumpy ride for a little bit. Again, if we also found, as we were doing a lot of trial and errors, thank you, there were times where we had to delete a minion and start over and bring it into SUSE Manager. And this was, at times, why isn't this minion coming on board? Why isn't SUSE Manager, I can see it in the Salt menu, but I can't find, I click on that and it doesn't show up back in, the Systems tab. It's like, why isn't it showing up in Systems tab? And we went back and forth with that for a while. Sometimes we found that simply, if we delete the Salt, if we delete the key off the minion, we needed to also then create a new machine ID as well. And don't know exactly why that was, but it seemed to work cleaner that way. If once we deleted the machine ID, recreated the Salt, then we re-added it to the minion, accepted the key, waited the 5 minutes for the the high state to run, then it would show up in our SUSE Manager. And this is our environment. It could be because we were a little bit kludgy at first, but that's some of the things that we found that you might have to consider if you have problems, getting a machine to recognize. If you've deleted the key, you may also need to, just recreate the machine ID. It doesn't hurt anything else. It's not used for, that I'm aware of, much else. And since we're big, we're also trying to get away from using templates in VMware because we've been burned there. We don't want to go back there. So we're trying to start automating our system builds using Salt Cloud and AutoFS, or AutoYast. Okay, and so we've got a number, and we've been able to perfect this pretty well. Unfortunately, right now, Salt Cloud's not supported in SLES, and so it is what it is. Also, currently, and I didn't know if we were going to get this announcement this week or not, that Red Hat was going to be supported in.
It is supported since the 21st of October.
Oh, all right. See, I have that at the very end. Expected resolution by SUSECON 2016. So that we didn't have, since we're a Red Hat shop too, we had to find ways around, continue to support our Red Hat infrastructure. Also, we had some problems with our SLES for SAP installations. And so You know, it wouldn't necessarily, and it was a kind of a combination between SUSE Manager and Salt, that the package module didn't recognize that the OS was SLES for SAP. And it would just, you know, of course, then the package module wouldn't work, and we had to find a way around that. Again, some of this is, you know, I think we're 2 releases back still on our production SUSE Manager. So some of these things may have already been cleaned up. Caveat, star, you know, exclamation point. A couple of other things that we found along the way. The way that we did find some areas where we had conflicts with the top SOS, the top state file. SUSE Manager has his own, or her own, its own, top state file. Well, at the very beginning of that top state file, it's bracket star, so it wants to do everything. And being that we're also now rolling out to AIX, we have to be very careful that we don't try to apply a Linux state file to an AIX system. So, so we had to be careful with that top file. Some of the other issues we had, you know, SUSE Manager doesn't fully use all the grains. The system set manager, you know, I'd like it to be able to use the grains of a system, you know, so I can highlight and filter based off a grain versus, you know, other things. We also found that within the environmental settings aren't always compatible with salts and SUSE Manager. So just some things there that we kind of bumped along the way. And of course, some of the salt versioning as we try to work with some of the newer features and then try to stay maintained on the supported version of salt within SUSE. And so there's, you know, because SUSE wants to continue to maintain a structured, supported, secure deployment of SALT, they may provide extra features or functionality or security checks that may not be in the upstream open source version. So those are some of the bumps we found. Not all of them, some of them, but it's been good so far. So how did we overcome some of these? As I ramble on here. All right, first, shall I say it again? Clear the machine ID. You know, I should have put that 3 or 4 times. If you're using templates, clear the machine ID, and before you deploy salt to it, clear the machine ID. That's critical, especially if you're going to if you're on SUSE 2.1 right now, and in a VMware environment. It's critical to make sure that your systems are unique before you do the upgrade. Must be done before the upgrade. It will cause you problems if you have duplicate machine IDs in your environment. And then we took control of that top state file and we pushed it up to our Git FS and then basically modified it some so that we could, you know, at the same time make it more functional with our environment with Linux or with AIX and hopefully in the future with Windows. And then because SALT is so extensible, and my coworker up here, Jake, and I are neither one, you know, heavy-duty Python coders, but we were able to, or actually Jake was able to write our own Python modules to recognize SLES for SAP. So that by using that, then as soon as and then when we put our key, our SUSE Manager in our key file, and we pointed it to a SLES for SAP key that had the repos that we wanted to deploy to the SLES for SAP infrastructure. With this new module that we wrote, it was then able to recognize that operating system, pull in those repos that we wanted, and bring it into SUSE Manager as a native machine. And for our environment, like I mentioned, we had to be very, very careful. Our senior VP over IT was very critical of us. When we first showed him the capabilities of SALT, it scared him to death, quite frankly. And he, you know, you can do what? You know, well, yeah, that's great. And he's like, no, that's not great. The ability to, from the command line, if we had all the minions pointing to a single SUSE Manager Salt Master, as I call it, SM squared, it's mine, star, infrastructure, if somebody could accidentally, from a command line, salt, star, some command, there wasn't a whole lot of protection there to prevent that from happening across every minion in our environment. There are other ways to make that happen. Being new still yet, we didn't feel comfortable with some of those. And as we continue to look at SUSE Manager as it grows, as Salt Enterprise, we look at the ACL options and whatnot. There's still changes there we could look at. So for our environments, for now, we stood up multiple SUMA servers. And so we have, and I'll have a picture of this on the next slide. So we have a SUMA server for our test environment, a SUMA server for our QA environment, a SUMA server for our test and our QA and pre-prod and prod. You get the idea. So that minions only join a particular channel that follows our Git infrastructure. We're still using Salt Cloud. Don't ask. And then we created direct repos, in which we can now go back and clean up, because we were doing direct. We would just create repo and pull in the. We have a pulp server to pull down patches from Red Hat, bring those in to our SUMA box, create the repo, and then share that manually, and then push those repos out via Salt to our RHEL boxes to kind of work around, because at the time we didn't have RHEL support. So some of those, because Salt was so extensible, and because both SUSE and Salt were so willing to work and help us overcome some of the issues, it made it possible that we have a fully functional and production ready, and we use it daily in our environment. So that's where we've gotten to, and I'm speaking really fast. So here, I know you probably can't see this, and I will try not to trip myself. This is kind of the description. This purple box appears our Salt or our Git server, our GitLab server. Each of these light yellow boxes is a particular project within Git. So we have our Linux teams project. We may have the SAP Basis team project, and then they have their own workflow. The production code is the gold code. If they need a new feature or something, they check that code out, make the changes, and push it down through to their test channel. And of course, we have Salt set up to monitor that test channel. And depending on what the code is, we may want it immediately pushed. And so we have Salt set up at times to react. As soon as it sees that change in GitFS, it immediately applies that change to all of the machines that are assigned to that SUSE Manager server. And if once they, yes, that worked, that's great, we're happy with it, then they can take the same code again and apply it to their dev environment. And then the same thing happens again. And once they're happy with all the machines in the dev environment that worked well, they can do it again. They just apply that same code to their QA and apply the same code to pre-prod and then finally to prod. And then now, once it's been pushed to prod, all the environments are identical. And that new branch then can be deleted, and because now it's in the golden code at the Git level. And that's how we're doing it with our Linux code. NTP and our DNS settings and whatnot. We're maintaining them all within our Git infrastructure at the top, and allowing Salt to then deploy those files as need be. And of course, that's what we have today. And that protected us. And then our senior VP of IT was now happy. Because you couldn't log into this SUME Manager and be able to run a command that would affect production. And so we're completely isolated and protected in that fashion. As I slide back over here to keep from tripping myself. And this is where we want to end up, of course. We want to be able to have that simplified infrastructure of a single SUSE Manager Salt Master that allows us, and not just for our Linux environment, but as you can see, my RHEL minions, my Windows minions, my Linux, my AIX minions, my SUSE minions, all reporting to my SUSE Manager Saltmaster machine. Now, of course, this side over here, the AIX and Windows, would have nothing, we would care less about that in Suma. But, my RHELs and my SUSE Manager and my SLES boxes would work just fine within. But I still want to be able to manage that from a single server. That's where we want to be. That's where we want to get to. Any questions so far? I'm rambling pretty quickly here. Sir?
Just a remark. You will get there.
I know, yes.
You will get there.
So that's where we're going. And we, again, it was kind of that seed. The Linux team is that seed of let them try it first. Where's Mikey? If you're familiar with the commercial for the cereal. We are that team that allows, or that's willing and small enough yet so we can experiment and try and learn, because we were not and are still not Git experts. And if this is not the right Git model, then we're open to suggestions. But it works. It's been working well enough for us over the past 3 or 4 months now that we've finally gotten this deployed and working. And we're pretty happy with what we're getting right now. It's pretty snappy. It's extremely snappy. What am I saying? We were able to deploy. We're just now getting to. Let me go back. Well, actually, right now we are here right now, except for this part. All of these guys are reporting to here. It's just we haven't given anybody else permission to log into it yet. So that only our team has the ability to destroy everything. But it has helped because at times we had to roll out a quick package for configuration or for licensing management for our IBM audit that was urgent. And we were able to deploy that package and to over 400 machines in like 30 seconds. And that included part of that module, or that state file, included adding the repo that held the RPMs for and we had the state file that determined whether it was, because it was a separate package for Red Hat versus SUSE from IBM. Thank you very much. And so we had, the if-then statements in Salt in our state file. So if it was recognized that it was a Red Hat file or a Red Hat system, it would deploy this repo to point to this package and deploy that package and report back. If it was a SUSE box, it would add this repo, add that package, deploy and report back. If it didn't recognize the OS at all, then of course it would give us a warning that it was unrecognized OS for our minions. So that it worked well. It was an urgent thing that the VP wanted pushed out, right then, that day. So within a few hours, we had the complete infrastructure deployed. The SALT modules completely written and deployed, so pretty slick, pretty slick. So that's kind of where. Yeah. So, and at this point, I'll turn over to Rob. But I want to say that at this point, it's been an awesome partnership between SUSE and SALT with Tyson Foods, and allowing us the ability to sometimes point out things that might have been warts at the time, both from a SALT standpoint and from a SUSE standpoint, and from a Tyson standpoint, we had plenty of warts to overcome. Machine ID, remember that. If you don't remember anything else, remember that. I just want to say it was an awesome opportunity for us as a company to experiment that.
So I have a question for you, Patrick.
Uh-oh. Wait, this is not pre-planned, by the way.
So if I remember correctly, it's 1 year this month that you and I had our first conversation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and you guys, how big's your team?
3?
3 people. Production?
Yes.
So we went through introduction with SALT and SUSE Manager 3, went through a beta And today, less than 12 months, we're up here presenting about how this production environment's running with SUSE Manager and Salt. You guys have a fantastic team. You really do.
So I say to point that out, and the partnership between SUSE and SALT, which should point in the right direction. 6 months ago, we hired Jake to come to work with us as a full-time employee at Tyson Foods. 1, he had never heard of SUSE Manager. 2, he had never heard of SALT. And within 6 months, he caught my vision, and we have grown, and we have been able to teach the AIX team, our SAP Basis team, our SAP Database team, and now everybody's coming to us, we need this now, you know, and we're going, no, not yet. So because we're, being able to expand and grow with this environment in such a short period of time, even with the limited Python knowledge that we have, or extremely limited on my side, we're able to build what if we can think of what we're trying to do, and if it's not already a module within SALT or a capability within SUSE, we're able to write that to get us by today, and then of course take that, push it upstream to both SUSE and SALT, saying, we need this, and here's how we're getting around it. And they've been very acceptant of the changes that we're offering and the challenges that we're facing to continue to make the product better.
Yeah, and that's exactly why this was able to happen so fast. It was teamwork. The first time that I was introduced to SUSE was with Rick on the Tyson, Patrick. Actually, I think I talked with Patrick first and then started working with Rick, and it was my first time hearing about SUSE Manager as well. On the SALT side of this, we like our product. We see a lot of value in our product, and the story of being able to spin up new people that come on a team, that's what we like to hear. That's what we focus on as a company, is to make this easy to adapt into different environments, and not only adapt, but to bring new people in, and get those stood up. It's not only about the tools, it's about the people that are using the tools. And this, on my side, it was an extreme pleasure. So we didn't have a partnership with SUSE at the time. And how do we make this happen moving forward? How do we make the dream that Patrick has of having this central system and the security checkpoints in between the different environments? How do we do that? And it's going to happen. One, Tyson's going to make sure we make that happen. That's one. But two, you should already know, coming to this conference, and if you look at that agenda and you see SALT, 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 it's obvious there is a new partnership here between SUSE and SALT, and we're both focused on making sure that this works for our users on both sides of the house. We really enjoy it. We know that we're going to get to that, just like you said, we are going to get there. SUSE Manager is going to get there. SALT's going to be there to support anything. Our teams work very closely together. Not only our sales team, but our engineering team. Our founder is here. By the way, he's at our booth, so if you ever want to go talk to him and see what this relationship really is outside of the public marketing of what the partnership means, which is really important. It's truly something Tom believes in. He believes that the way forward for us and for SUSE is to find customers like Tyson and find out what they need and give them what they need. So that's really what I have. It's been a very short. I look back at it when you were talking. I started thinking about it, like November last year. I remember coming up into Christmas going, I'm working with Tyson. This is kind of cool. And SUSE on top of that, and then I was like, I got a lot to learn with SUSE Manager. So we were there to help Patrick through some of it, but and the other fortunate thing is we actually live in the same neighborhood, so that just worked out.
Yeah. So I would point out, even, we started talking a year ago, but also, SUSE Manager went to actually released in April. So, when you're looking at the work that's gone on, a lot of the stuff, it's the real world with the real product. It's just been a few short months.
Right.
And you guys have been able to do a great job on that. Congratulations.
Yeah. No. Machine ID. So.
That's why you should be using Kiwi to build all of your templates.
Yeah. And not templates. No. Yuck. No templates. No templates. No. AutoYast. I like AutoYast. Any questions? It's hard to hear me ramble.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Now you have got a configuration database. How did you handle this before you started with SUSE Manager? Was it Excel or?
By hand in people's home directories. Yeah. Admin A had his little subset of files, and Admin B had his little subset of files. They were supposed to go into a shared or a subdirectory on every machine, of code that we deployed. Then we start looking at the actual code that's in each one of those machines and find out that, Admin A actually got onto that machine last night and changed that file because there was an issue. But he forgot to tell anybody, and that change never got propagated to all the other systems. So now that one has the new version, and all these other systems don't. And so it's still chaos. We're still, now that we have the infrastructure in place, and we have buy-off and the stability and security breakdown for us, we can now start enforcing the code fixes and changes. Yes, sir.
So if you don't use the templates, how do you do the installations? Do you use Yast and Kickstart, and you have like a base, and from there on you customize?
Right. Yep. I have exactly. We built a mini ISO just with enough driver in it, and in that we set the kernel parameter line to point to a particular, give it itself a network ID, because we don't have boot P in our environment. We don't have any kind of DHCP for our server environment. So we statically assign an IP address in that kernel parameter. We point to a AutoYast network file that's actually stored in our Git infrastructure. And then we point to the boot install off the network. And then that AutoYast that we maintain then, it has just enough. It lays down the base OS. It lays down the root volume group for us. And that's really all we want. The packages, the volume groups, and a little bit of the security. And at the very end of that, we've done this a couple of different ways. One way is to have a post-install script set up at the base of AutoYast that goes out to and installs Salt. We've experimented a little bit with auto-accepting keys, because we had so many we were doing at one point. Now we've changed that a little bit to make that a little bit more secure and turned off auto-accept off. So that's how and then we have Salt modules and states that if it needs to be a configuration of CI, a SAP CI server, and we have a state file for that. If it needs to be an application server, or it needs to be a database server, we have very specific, extra packages or extra repos that need to be added, and it's all done from Salt at that point.
So what's the scope? I mean, I think you mentioned 400. What about when you need to start doing thousands? How are you going to scale that?
Run. No. Well, and that's part of the learning process that we're still doing. How we're gonna handle that. We're still learning.
Salt Master can handle about 10,000 minions.
I spoke to the person at Boot. They told me about 3,000 perhaps is more optimistic.
Do you know who you spoke with? Oh, are you talking about SUSE Manager?
Yeah, the SUSE Manager.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so there is, yeah.
So SUSE Manager, that number, Salt itself, a little higher. Yeah, so, yes, sir.
So I'm the product owner for SUSE Manager. So we are working on scalability, and the ultimate goal is 100,000.
Not on a single server.
Yeah.
To be clear.
Well, we have already 10,000 on a single server. And it depends on not the number of systems, but the number of concurrent systems interacting with SUSE Manager.
So because this is built on Salt, I'll give you the Salt numbers is 10,000 minions per server is the kind of the top point. But we have customers that have, I'm not saying this is just information because I think it's kind of cool. 27,000 minions to a single master is what LinkedIn has. They've customized a few things, and of course they're not doing probably everything you're doing, but it is an extremely scalable core system. And that same code, I always like to point out on the Salt side, you can throw on a Raspberry Pi. Okay, and there's some reasons behind it. We can sit down and go through why the system is as scalable it is on resources for the hardware there. Now, of course, you're not going to run 10,000 minions on a Raspberry Pi. Please don't take that as the thing.
And one of the things we're looking at as well is we have a web interface that we've written. Have written that so we're trying to turn over some of the system builds to the owners of the systems that are the system requesters. So they know what they want, and so they can fill out the form. That form then auto-generates pieces of the rest of the system, you know, the auto-yes file and the state file that it's going to use. And then that automatically goes out to our Salt Cloud to talk to VMware to start deploying this system and the state files that's going to be applied afterward. And so we have very little interaction at that point, except for maybe the acceptance, make sure that we'll still be in the channel, but mostly just to validate the things that they put in there. They didn't ask for like 500 gig of RAM, or 14 terabytes of disk, they didn't need. So we'll validate some of those steps, but it'll continue to push along through the system to build the boxes. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to lead up to the question. Sorry.
Okay.
So you use AutoYes to create it, then Salt actually puts it down based on its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Do you then follow back up and like if some rogue system administrator accidentally changed one of those that it sets it back, or?
We can. We haven't had to do that yet. We haven't been faced with that issue yet because I've threatened people with their lives if they touch them, just kidding.
We'll be the same forever.
Yeah, right.
I know where you said it's a very popular saying.
Right, yeah. So don't touch. But we have the ability, because we have the state files, we can then reapply those. And we have ways that we haven't experimented yet with to continue that validation of make sure that things are where they're supposed to be, the versions are where they're supposed to be, and whatnot. And so we got a lot on our plate that we're still trying to explore. And it's at the same time I'm trying to plug a lot of this into Splunk and as well and get some other reporting data and whatnot. But so yeah.
In that situation there, on the Salt side, you would look at to handle configuration drift beacons. So a beacon would run on that minion watching for any file changes with iNotify or something like that. Once it detects that, sends an event into the reactor system, which then would just, because you already have the state files, it would just lay those state files and revert it back to what it should be.
And that's the area we haven't gone to yet in laying down beacons and whatnot.
Yeah, we just got people that become computer service managers because they know how to use a keyboard.
Right, yeah.
How
Yes,
about
sir.
decommissioning? I mean, I don't know enough about SUSE Manager to even know how it works, but let's say in our environment we're going to have systems that are probably going to live for about 2 weeks only. They get created automatically and then they just they've been shut down. How that process works for you?
Well, right now we're doing it manually. We go into SUSE Manager and find the machine and delete it. And that takes care of cleaning up the SUSE Manager side of the house. And then Although I could see, because of Salt Cloud has that ability for VMware, we could set up an interface that could do both for us. You know, delete the machine out of SUSE Manager and go and issue a Salt Cloud command to VMware to delete that box. If not, we do it manually today. You know, SUSE Manager delete, and then command line Salt Cloud delete server name, and we just haven't had that big of a need yet to do some of that. Although we're going to get there soon.
There's an option in SUSE Manager where you can re-provision the machine.
Okay.
So there's still a lot of pieces of SUSE Manager that we haven't even scratched the surface yet. That we're still learning. It's kind of that changing the tire on the bus while it's moving environment. Great questions, though. Yes, sir.
I want to add a remark to the teamwork. This is the true power of open source here, because it started from engineering, and it started on GitHub with us sending pull requests and issues to the SaltStack team, and they were extremely responsive and helpful. And this gave us also the trust to integrate it into the production. And what you see now, the announcement of the partnership and the cooperation on the management level emerged from this. But it was the power of open source, which shows here.
Yep. I have a little saying that goes, you know, SUSE plus salt equals success. And then for Tyson Foods, that truly has been the case.
Is that one of those stars?
Yeah, right. I own that one too, by the way. Creative Commons, you know.
Oh, we're talking open source.
Creative Commons is, okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll give you back 7 minutes of your day.